Well, we've discussed now the empire of war, the empire of money. Since you mentioned it in the beginning of the webcast, and since this piece will be available for viewers of LaRouche PAC very soon, I want to ask you a question about the empire of the mind. Mm-hmm. You've elaborated very clearly in the report that you've just published, Cusa, Kepler, and Shakespeare, what was actually genius, that the decline of the United States, especially since the death of President Roosevelt, has brought us to the point of existential threat to the future of mankind. And we've reached a point where the stupidity of people in general is almost a suffocating pressure on the individuals, the very few individuals who might be creative. Now, you very provocatively have taken the juxtaposition between two contemporaries, Johannes Kepler and William Shakespeare, who lived in similar times and perceptibly might have been dealing in differing fields. However, you've said that William Shakespeare has elaborated a scientific principle which has not been in a more precise form than perhaps any other scientist aside from Kepler himself and Kepler's forebearer, Nicholas of Cusa. But he elaborated it in the form of his entire canon of dramas, but most especially King Henry V, with the role of the character that Chorus plays. The essential section in which you elaborate this point in this report is Section 1, A Thesis, the Human Mind. And I have just a question that maybe you can elaborate a little bit more fully. With the domain of what we could call sense uncertainty or unreality, the shadow world that you describe as the projection of merely shadows cast, which most human beings would perceive as real, as reality. However, you say in King Henry V, Shakespeare has penetrated something which gets to a fundamental principle of human psychology, the difference between truth and sense certainty. That the question presented by Shakespeare is to ask the question of what the mere shadow is a shadow of what it actually is not. And you pose the question of the ontologically distinct yet coexisting functions of the superior human mind to what is merely the human brain, which are distinctly separate but interactive, you say, and find themselves in a circumstance of conflict with each other. So I wondered if you could say more.
I could say a bit on this because it's a very large subject, as you know, and you've had access to the full text of it. But the basic thing is, what is the difference between humanity and animals? That's the essential point. And to understand that, you have to understand a number of other things to show how that works and why it works that way. But what you're dealing with as Shakespeare, see, Shakespeare introduced in King Henry V a new concept which was essentially pedagogical. The notion that this power of insight is restricted to the creative intellect of the human being. Now, the related question is, what about the animals? The animals are not human. What does that mean? Well, it means they're not human. But what is it about the animals which makes them unhuman? the fact that the human species is the only known living species known to us presently, which is capable of actual intellectual creativity. That does not mean that animals cannot be clever, but they cannot change the laws by which they operate. And that's the difference. Now, the point is mankind, and what Shakespeare did with his Henry V was to make that distinction very clear. And he did it by saying that what people believe from experience is foolishness. What they think they experience from that is foolishness. They don't know what they're doing. Therefore, there's some people who understand that what human creativity means. That the human mind, when properly developed, is capable of actual creativity. That is, instead of working on the basis of what they know, their experience, and trying to draw conclusions from that experience, they make leaps. Leaps of discovery which the animal cannot make. In other words, the idea that a gradual experience is what gives you more intelligence may be true for animals, but it's not really creativity. Only the human mind is capable of the leaps in discovery. And the fact of the matter is also, and this will probably stump some of our listeners and viewers and so forth, but the fact is that the leap occurs in the human mind. The human mind is the only mind that can do this. No animal can invent a new principle. The characteristic of the human individual, which makes them creative, if they are creative, and most human beings are not able to be creative because they're conditioned to be stupid. They think they know everything. They think they've learned everything, but they know nothing new. They may know something new in the sense of novelty, but not new in the sense of a principle. Therefore, the distinction of man, let's take the animals, for example, the animal kingdom in general, living processes. They do evolve. They make leaps. The species makes a leap to a higher level, often in many cases. A species dies out, but is replaced by a higher version of the same thing. A revolution has occurred. So the point is that while the animal can biologically make a leap in species characteristics, mankind is the only species that can make a leap without having to become a different species. And that's the essence. The whole thing is laid out in this thing, which takes some time to go through. But that's the essence of the matter. Mankind has a potential, if we exercise it, which no other living creature on this planet or any place else we know can do. The universe evolves progressively. That's the general function of the universe, unless they blow up. Whole parts of the universe blow up at times. Like the sun, for example, 2 billion years from now, the sun will have blown up. And we have got to improve ourselves to be capable of moving away from that joint before it does blow up. And it's going to blow up before the 2 billion years, because it's going to change its character and become very nasty. So we human beings have to use our creativity to develop new things, new ways of doing things. We are not going to go to Mars to live on, not if I have a sense of it, because there's no way we can maintain life of human beings on Mars under present conditions. We would have to change Mars first. Now, at some point, human beings should be able to create a change in Mars and in other ways. We're going to go to the moon anyway if we have any brains at all. We're not going to live on the surface of the moon. That's only nuts would do that. If you're going to live on the moon, even for a short period of time, you're going to dig down deep underneath there, otherwise you're not going to make it. But this is what we're coming to. The point is, the way we've educated people in this society, in general, they don't know what it is to be human. You have some people like Vernadsky, for example. Vernadsky is a true genius. He was a true genius in the matters of life and similar things like that. You have had people like that. Nicholas Cusa was a genius, one of the greatest geniuses that humanity has ever known. And his follower, was not an immediate follower because there was some time distance there. So this kind of thing exists. We human beings, if we are properly conditioned to do so, have a power of voluntary creativity which no other species known to us has. And the human mind, when properly developed and encouraged, is capable of making discoveries which can willfully change the character of Earth, willfully change the order of the solar system. That can happen. It should be our mission and intent to do that. Because the sun is very nasty, can be very nasty, and it is not going to last the 2 billion years which some people have scheduled for existence before it blows up. It will become absolutely intolerable much earlier. So therefore, we have to develop higher powers per capita for controlling the forces of Earth and the forces in the solar system. That's the difference of man. And that's the nobility of man. And what you have is a society in which everybody except a few, the oligarchy, are kept down, intellectually crushed. They are creative people, but they're not allowed to be creative. They go to schools where they're taught not to be creative, but only mimics of something or other. And therefore, the question of which you've opened up here is way beyond the range of this particular session at this time. But I could given some indications. That's where it goes. There is in man a power of creativity, true creativity, which is not known to us as existing in any living form of animal life. Unfortunately, only a tiny minority, still a minority, which has actually developed a conscious knowledge of what creativity is. Most people have no idea of what creativity is. They use the word creativity because they don't know what it is. If they knew what it was, they wouldn't call it creativity. And that's my specialty. And that's the specialty of a limited number, unfortunately, of people on this planet who actually have that capability. I mean, for Max Planck, for example, Einstein, for example, there are people, there have been, like Nicholas Cusa, like Kepler, Bach, for example. Bach is a creative individual. You don't think he invented notes to you. And so all the greatest artists, the greatest thinkers known to us of mankind have this same quality, the same dedication. And what's needed is to defend what mankind is potentially for the sake of what it is for a tiny minority of the population. And stop this bestialization of mankind, which is the dominant feature of the situation now.